This is going to be an ever philosophical interlude for today. It's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be, is everything metaphysical, either solipsistic, or is it rooted in external reality? So, external to the subjectivist perception that kind of governs and garners whatever we perceive a sense state, and which is then compressed and compacted into Kantian categories of judgment, or maybe not non-Kantian, but it's often used, or in the logicized sense, as categories of judgment. So, well, what is metaphysics? Is metaphysics rooted in divorce from physical realm, divorce from materialism, divorce from atomism, divorce from logicism, divorce from scientism, divorce from biologicism, divorce from even astrophysicalism? And so is it pure kind of quantum mechanical and negentropy antimatter that concerns itself with the conditions of the onticity of metaphysics? So I think that in order for something to be truly metaphysical real, it doesn't necessarily need to pass a Turing universal test, such as the positive existence of the soul, in which I take a kind of a free valued or many valued logical stance on it, given the possible world and trans-world semantics. So I think that the basic entities which govern the solipsistic world tend to be morally nihilistic. Not always, but they tend to be morally nihilistic due to their dollaristic transactional values, which inhibits the human psyche and thus is expunged in a negentropic, hedonistic, dollaristic deficit way, like a kind of a reduction in sales, reduction in profits, to put it in kind of in a proto-economic sense. So I think that external reality, now Kant says external reality is what's independent of phenomenological mind-dependent perceptivism or perception. Perception is what anchors us into understand the faculties of fundamental metaphysical a priori and a posteriori laws, whether they're synthetic a priori, analytic a posteriori. So I think that the ultimate question, it kind of goes back simply to the notion of whether all metaphysical essences derive themselves from external solipsistic contingent variables or factors. So I think that ultimately, I again take a panarchistical notion, although I do want to see it quantum mechanically more repudiated in the philosophical literature about, if one is a solipsistic quantum perceiver, what happens if they're quantum teleported into an externally objective mind independent universe, and what does it mean to simultaneously perceive external and solipsistic reality in one qualic perception at the same time, simultaneously? So I think that metaphysics doesn't always really say in concrete kind of integral definitive terms whether it's solipsistically rooted or external reality rooted. Sometimes it's in an interactionism. Sometimes it's kind of an eliminativism of monistic thinking, and it's kind of instead catapults itself into the very notionality of kind of a trifecta of potential modal possibilisms, pluralities that govern all possible substantia and abstracta and objects that in themselves possess ontologyhood or onticityhood. So I believe that one should be a kind of a found theorentist again, but perhaps not to quipster Susan Hack too much, but one should be a found, reliabilist, or found coherentist. Yeah, I mean, it's not merely the reliability of the provability of the perception that governs metaphysical truth. Sometimes it's whether the foundations of the principles, the axioms themselves confirm each other when they're tested by thought experiments or tested by quantum empiricism, if they truly kind of garner hypothesization. And that can be one step to understand metaphysical law and what is truly eternal, in my opinion, my argument. So finally, I want to close this very brief lecture, by arguing that philosophical literature often doesn't delve into the mere topology of when precisely, without encountering a Sorites paradox, when solipsistic absolute perception, gestalt, say that of idealist perceptions become divorced from external or solipsistic reality simultaneously, and that's your pan-Meinonian. And they also don't say what it means to be solipsistic. Solipsism just divorced from everything else that exists ontologically, and only one's mind. Well, then how does the mind even exist? If it's not, it's not just a simulation, because simulations themselves have ideologies. And if everything's external, well then, where does the subjective qualia and consciousness come from? It kind of goes back to an interactional, omniversal dualism between abstracta and tropes and properties that seem to have a quantum kind of Zwitterionic kind of translational duality. Well, I thank you so much for appreciating this brief lecture, and I want to wish you well. Thank you so much.